I knew it was coming, long before it actually happened. Not when my access card suddenly stopped working, and certainly not when they called me into the conference room. It was days before subtle things, really. The overly polite smiles, the hesitant pauses in conversations, the glances that lingered on me a beat too long. But I didn't expect it to happen so quickly. The lobby was buzzing with the usual morning rush, people hurrying, laughing, discussing presentations. I was heading toward the turnstile, already running through my to-do list, and I tapped my access card. Red light. I tapped it again. And again. "You'll need to go through the guest entrance," the security guard said, not bothering to look up. I gave a small, wry smile. "I've worked here for 6 years." He glanced at the screen, then at me, and in his eyes, for just a fleeting moment, I saw something I wouldn't forget: pity. "Miss Morgan, you're requested in HR." The conference room was oppressively quiet. 2 people, a glass of water, printed documents. "A leak of confidential information," the woman said, her voice perfectly even. "We have evidence." They laid out sheets of correspondence on the table. My name, my signature, the way I wrote. I stared at the words and suddenly it clicked. This wasn't an accident. It was carefully orchestrated. "You can leave through mutual agreement," she continued. "It's in your best interest." I signed, not because I confessed to anything, but because I already knew this was just the beginning. Reputation dies faster than a person. The first day, I simply didn't receive any replies. The second, people began to avoid me. By the third, they questioned me in hushed whispers. "Tell us the truth, Claire, is it really true?" That was the most painful question, because it came from people who knew me for years and still doubted. My name vanished from the work chats, from the email newsletters, from the projects, as if I'd been meticulously erased with a rubber eraser, leaving no trace. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't defend myself. I didn't write lengthy posts. I observed. And very quickly, I noticed who was feeling too confident. Mark Reeves. He'd taken my desk within 2 days. He'd secured my project, my team, my future. And yet he'd found the time to write me, "I'm stunned by what's happening. If you need anything, I'm here." We met in a cafe. He spoke the right words, too right, in fact. "You're strong," he said. "You'll get through this." He looked at me with the pity of someone who'd already won. And it was in that moment that I finally understood. I hadn't just been framed. I'd been replaced. People believe revenge begins with rage. They are profoundly mistaken. Revenge begins with silence and numbers. I opened the old archives. I reconstructed file versions. I created a timeline. Who had access? When? Why? I recalled conversations, inflections, small requests. "Could I see the report?" "Leave the laptop, I'll close it." It wasn't improvisation. It was a strategy. Mark knew my style, my weaknesses, my tendency to trust those around me. But he overlooked one crucial thing. I don't disappear when I'm broken. I become more observant. I moved into a modest apartment, reduced my life to its barest essentials, and I gave myself time. They assumed they'd won. That I'd fled, crumbled, accepted defeat. Let them. Sometimes, to exact true revenge, you must allow your enemy to believe he's conquered. The first message came from someone I'd never expected to hear from. Nathan Brooks, a former lawyer for the company. He'd been quietly, meticulously dismissed a year ago, just as they were now attempting to do with me. I hadn't registered it then. Now I remembered. "I heard what happened to you. If you want to talk, I know how they do it." We met in a bar on the city's outskirts. He looked worn but possessed a steady, observant gaze, the type of person who'd paid dearly for trust and no longer freely dispensed it. "You're not the first," he said, "and you won't be the last. They sanitize the company's reputation by sacrificing employees, especially those who become inconvenient." "I don't need theories," I replied. "I need evidence." He nodded. "Then you'll need time, and for Mark to feel secure." That's when it struck me I was on the right path. I began appearing in places where I could be seen. I posted neutral updates, crafted an illusion of moving on. I accidentally crossed paths with former colleagues a couple of times. Rumors began to circulate amongst Mark. Claire is looking for a new job. Claire isn't angry. Claire has accepted the situation. Meanwhile, I was uncovering others who'd suffered. Those who remained silent. Those who were willing to speak but not first. Sometimes revenge isn't a blow, it's a web. A month later, Mark initiated contact. "I've heard you're considering offers," he said, his tone almost friendly. "If you'd like, I can lend a voice without any hard feelings." Without any hard feelings, I agreed to meet. He spoke of negotiations, a new project, the difficulty he'd had after all of this. And in a fleeting moment, he made a critical error. "You left your laptop unlocked," he remarked casually. "I'd been wondering how you could have been so careless." I smiled. "I always lock it." He paused just a second, but it was enough. That phrase wasn't in the official report. It was known to only 2 people. I stepped out of the cafe with a tremor in my knees, not from fear, but from confirmation. Everything was aligning. And yet, a sudden turn caught me completely off guard. Nathan stopped responding. 2 days later, I learned he was working again for my former company, as an external consultant. The world tilted on its axis. I realized I wasn't the only one playing this game, and the rules had just been rewritten. The news about Nathan just wouldn't leave me alone. He'd gone back to where they'd tossed him out back to the company that dealt with people as cleanly as they erased names from a database. And he'd timed it perfectly. I tried to reach him again, but there was no answer. His LinkedIn profile had been updated, but my messages remained unread. It was as if the man who'd told me, "I know how they do it," had simply vanished. That's when the real fear crept in. Not the paralyzing kind, but a cold, urgent need to act fast. If Nathan had been involved from the start, then I'd been exposed. And if Mark knew I was digging, well, that meant he was already on my trail. The confirmation came unexpectedly. I was practically offered a job, and then suddenly I was denied it twice, then 3 times. The doors just kept closing. It dawned on me then, someone was messing with my reputation again. Quietly, methodically. That night, for the first time, I started to wonder if I'd already lost before I'd even thrown a punch. But it was then that I found a letter that changed everything. It was old, archived, sent to Nathan a year ago by Mark. Subject: "How to make this legally sound." I reread the correspondence again and again. Mark had been writing to Nathan long before my dismissal. He was discussing risks, potential consequences, shifting responsibility. It was all meticulously laid out, almost elegantly, designed to make the victim me, the one who couldn't defend themselves. Nathan wasn't an ally. He was the architect of the scheme. And now he'd returned, ostensibly to ensure nothing would surface. It took me several days to make a decision, the most difficult of my life. If I were to pursue this to its conclusion, I'd have to step out of the shadows, to risk not just revenge, but the last vestiges of my reputation, to take a step from which there would be no return. I contacted a journalist from a business publication. We weren't acquainted, but she'd been covering corporate scandals. "I have documents," I told her, "but I need a guarantee that you'll see this through." She paused, considering. "And are you prepared?" I was. In that moment, the desire for vengeance ceased to be personal. It transformed into something public, something larger. The appearance of Nathan was utterly unexpected, a thing I hadn't even dared to imagine. He didn't call, didn't send a message. He simply stood outside the coffee shop where I usually worked in the mornings, hunched over my laptop. It felt deliberate, like he'd somehow known I'd be there, like he always knew a little more than he should. "Claire," he said, his voice remarkably calm. "We need to talk." I should have been leaving, I knew it, but I just nodded. We settled at a table by the window. He looked worn. He wasn't like I remembered him, gaunt, with dark circles under his eyes, wearing a ridiculously expensive coat that did nothing to hide the look of a man trapped. "I didn't betray you," he said almost immediately. And if you're working with journalists now, you're making a terrible mistake. I said nothing. Mark used me, he continued, his voice losing some of its earlier confidence. He came prepared with a whole plan. My choice was either to play along or to end up where you are sooner than I deserved. He spoke with a certain conviction, but it lacked the usual arrogance. Almost genuinely. You think I wanted to go back to that company, he said, a dry smile playing on his lips. I went back to fix things, to keep Mark in check. He leaned closer. You're smart, Claire. You understand how this works. Sometimes, to dismantle a system, you have to get inside it. A seed of doubt began to sprout in my mind, creeping slowly, dangerously upwards. Then why didn't you come to me before? I asked. He looked away. Because I feared you wouldn't want to hear the truth anymore. He slid a USB drive across the table. This is everything I have. It's not pretty, but it's enough to stop Mark. If you give it to the press, innocent people will get caught in the crossfire. Do you really want that? It was a clever move. An exceptionally clever one. I almost believed him. Then he said, when you signed that agreement with HR, I knew you'd choose silence. I raised my eyes, meeting his gaze. I didn't tell you I'd signed that agreement, I said, my voice steady. He froze just for a moment, but it felt like an eternity. You, he stammered. Mark said, no, I cut him off. It's not in the official documents, and Mark couldn't have known. We stared at each other, and for the first time, I saw something other than calculation in his eyes, fear. You were there, I said. You knew the details from the beginning. He tried to speak, but it was too late. I stood up, took the USB drive, and added, thank you, Nathan. You just gave me something I desperately needed. What? He asked, his voice a rasp. I looked at him one last time, a silent acknowledgement. Confirmation. And I walked away without turning back. The article appeared on Monday morning, without my name in the headline, yet brimming with facts that defied denial. Correspondence, time-stamped exchanges, screenshots of document revisions, commentary from experts in corporate ethics. The company vehemently denied everything for precisely 3 hours. Then came the internal investigations. By evening, Mark had ceased to answer his phone. His profile vanished from the company website as swiftly as my own had once. The article appeared on Monday morning, without my name in the headline, yet brimming with facts that defied denial. Correspondence, time-stamped exchanges, screenshots of document revisions, commentary from experts in corporate ethics. The company vehemently denied everything for precisely 3 hours. Then came the internal investigations. By evening, Mark had ceased to answer his phone. His profile vanished from the company website as swiftly as my own had once disappeared. The company issued an official apology, not because they'd felt remorse, but because they'd run out of options. I was offered compensation, a letter of recommendation, a tacit agreement, unspoken. I declined the latter. It mattered to me more than that. Within a week, I received messages from 3 individuals, then 5 more. People who had been framed as I had been. People who'd believed they were alone. We met. We drank coffee. We spoke honestly. And the company issued an official apology. Not because they'd felt remorse, but because they'd run out of options. I was offered compensation, a letter of recommendation, a tacit agreement, unspoken. I declined the latter. It mattered to me more than that. Within a week, I received messages from 3 individuals, then 5 more. People who had been framed as I had been. People who'd believed they were alone. We met. We drank coffee. We spoke honestly. And I understood. Vengeance wasn't achieved through defeat. It was through